What's up, family? It is your man, CRB Jr., Courtney Robert Brown Jr., here at Motown Mafia Podcast, a Big Boss Filmworks production. Hope all is well. I am here at Miami International Airport, about to do a little business in the Caribbean for the weekend. And this airport was the turning point in my life. So thought I'd share an interesting story of some reflection with the family. So it's most of you who follow me and follow the channel, follow my man, shout out to Eddie Jr. over at Real True Street Crimes. Have followed some of my partners in content creation. Al Prophet over at American Dope, or Scott Bernstein over at Gangster Chronicles, or any of the above, or some of the other content networks. May have heard of some of our exploits back in the day. So just to bring everybody up to speed, you know, I worked for my dad basically from 1986 to the year 2000. So when Pops was locked up from 77 to 84 on the huge 32-man indictment case with the Fat Man, you know, the one much chronicled in the newspapers and television, the run that him and Eddie had, him running the show for the big man from 1969 to 1977, and that of course leads to the 32-man indictment. So hey family, back to the story here. I guess we had a little technical difficulty there. So then again, to recap, so Dad turns himself in April 1st, 77. He's sent down to Atlanta. Right now at this time in history, Atlanta, Lewisburg, Terre Haute, Leavenworth is where they're sending all of the narcotics kingpins and big-time mafiosos at this period. So the big man, he's at Leavenworth doing his sentence. I think 5-0 is at Terre Haute. I think the great Dolph, Charles Rudolph, he gets sent to Leavenworth with Eddie, with the Fat Man. And Pops gets sent down to Atlanta. When he's there in Atlanta, he becomes friends with a guy named Mickey Beckworth. Mickey Beckworth is the number 2 man for Frank Matthews. Him and Mickey form a relationship later in life. The number 2 man for Eddie Jackson, number 2 man for Frank Matthews, would hook up and do some things. Becomes acquainted with Ike Atkinson, Sergeant Smack, much chronicled brother, R.I.P. Ike Atkinson. He's actually the character that the American Dope story was based off of. They gave Frank Lucas most of the credit for, actually. R.I.P. to Frank Lucas also. But it was that whole thing coming out of Vietnam with the military. It's really Ike Atkins, and we'll go in Pops later, some other content. Pop has great stories about just the kind of money and wealth that Ike Atkins had even while he was locked up. Vince Papa from the French Connection, he's in Atlanta. Tony Giacalone from the Detroit Mob, he's down in Atlanta. And so it's just a who's who of big fellas in organized crime. Back in those days, you didn't get to those kind of places unless you were really high up on the food chain. So to keep the story moving though, another guy who Pops meets while he's in Atlanta doing his time is a guy by the name of Basil Miller, referred to in some of the old content as Mr. B. Basil Miller was out of the Bahamas. He was a whale of a whale. He's a hustler's hustler, big fella's big fella. Mr. B had been working with Carlos Leader, who of course was a lieutenant for Pablo Escobar. People have ever seen the movie Blow, and they talk about Norman's Cay and Cat Island and those islands in the Bahamas that the Medellin cartel and Escobar used as their launching point to really get their thing, took their thing way over the top as far as them importing their bag from Colombia via the Bahamas into here Miami. So Mr. B and Pops form a relationship. He gets out a little bit ahead of Pops. Pops does about, of the 7 years he had to do, because back then again you only had to do a 30-year time, so he got a 21-year sentence. After 7 years he's eligible for parole. So when he gets paroled, by the time he gets paroled in 84, Mr. B has already been released. Mr. B got taken down on an international case. The feds were so desperate to get this guy. He was so big, so well connected, educated over in Europe, again tied in with all the big politicians in Haiti, in the Bahamas. Just the kind of guy that really they never talk about as far as black men in the game at his level. They form a relationship. Pops and Mr. B form a relationship while they're both locked up down in Atlanta. So Pops gets out in 84. He has his thing going. He's already set up with the Westies out of New York, some Irish mob guys out of Boston, some of his old Italian friends. So I'm graduating from high school as Pop. Well, I've actually started college as Pop was getting out, which you guys want an interesting read. There's The Big Man on Campus, available at bigbossfilmworks.com or on Amazon, which kind of fictionalized that era in my life when Pops had first come home and got his thing back going and I had started school. But that's a different story for a different time. So Pops comes home in 84. I'm working around him, but I'm not really working with him. But by 86, Pops basically brings me into the family business. And the first, what he's got going on by 86 is Mr. B has reached out to him and said that he's reestablished his thing back in the Bahamas. Resume is resume. Everybody knew about Eddie's organization. Everybody in those circles knew that my pop was Eddie's number 2 man. So, your reputation precedes you. People knew that the old man was used to running a really big-time organization and operation because of his reputation as being Eddie's number 2 man. So Mr. B cuts in the old man, tells him, look, why don't you come down to the Bahamas? Let's chop it up. Now, of course, the old man is still on federal parole, so, the whole fake ID, second identity thing. He goes down to the islands. They chop up the game. Mr. B informs him that he's got his network back set up, and if he'd like to get down with the program, they can do that. So Pops initiates that. The crew starts going down to the island, getting the bag. Sometimes Mr. B gets the bag brought here to Miami. Sometimes Mr. B gets the bag brought all the way to Detroit. So this is now in 86 and 87. By the end of 86, the thing with Mr. B and the Pops is going so swell. There's numerous runs that have to be made to get the money back down to the islands. This is when Pops brings me in kind of really to the family business. So through a very variety of smuggling net options, I would get the money from Detroit back to the Bahamas. Some of the real in-depth stuff on that part of the run, you'll have to check out on our Patreon channel to get the real full thing. But needless to say, I became a money launderer at this point. Planes, trains, automobiles, private jets, good old, whether it was American Airlines or back then, Pan Am was the main airport that you flew out of from Miami to the Bahamas. So I'm doing this run. Me and Mr. B have formed a relationship. In fact, it got to the point where he was so comfortable with me and the way I handled getting him his money, he tells the old man that he'd like me pretty much just to take over that responsibility. And all goes well. All goes well until fall of 87. Me and shout out to brother Speedy, brother named Speedy, his family. He was working with us. We were doing this run. I was waiting on Speedy to get to the old man's place to get the rest of the money so I could make my run down to the islands. Caused us to be a little bit sloppy on check-in. They don't I don't double check my ticket, and they don't put Junior on my name here, leaving Miami on my way to the Bahamas. And I end up getting pulled off the plane by the DEA. I spent the longest 3 hours of my life here at in the basement here at Miami International Airport. There's a whole detention center, or not even a detention center, it's like office space where it's U.S. Customs, DEA, FBI, all those alphabet boys. It's where you end up going if you end up getting a little bit of trouble in the airport until they figure out what they're gonna do with you. So I had noticed while I was eating lunch, there were a couple guys eyeballing me, but to be honest, I had got a little arrogant because I had so much success making the run. We were running late this particular flight, so as we say in the book, we had got sloppy, we had got arrogant, and we were about to pay the price for being sloppy and arrogant. DEA pulls me off the plane. They inform me that they need to search my bags immediately. I put up some protests. I said no search warrant, no can search the bag. Me and the